Hi, everyone. This is a continuation of the session we had on time management skills for high performance athletes following our athlete panel. Today, I'd just like to share with you the process of time management, different things we go to, but I'd like to focus some specific attention on the second point you see here, the Wheel of Life and the Eisenhower Matrix, which are both some great tools that you can utilize in terms of prioritizing the multiple tasks you're responsible for in a day. We'll briefly touch on schedule and to-dos as well, then we'll finish up with a summary. One of the things you're going to want to do before we dive into our content today is pause the video here and scan this QR code. This is going to take you to the workbook that's going to accompany this session and give you some of the worksheets you'll need to complete the activities we're going to talk about today. So in time management, there's a specific process we can follow or, different things that we can focus on in terms of managing and planning our time. The first is that we need to know our tasks and commitments and how much time those take us. So, for example, a homework assignment, how much time is that going to take you? And that may vary by assignment. Or practice, how long is it going to take you? But being careful to also include the details like your commute time and the time it's going to take you to get ready to be able to be on time for practice. We then need to be able to prioritize our tasks based on their level of importance and what's most urgent to get done in a day, and then schedule those accordingly. Now, this is where to-do lists and schedules can become really helpful, so we'll briefly touch on some of those in a little bit as well. We also want to make sure we're decreasing our distractions, right? We have a lot of things around us that can be distracting. So, for example, some people find if they're not working in a dedicated workspace within their home, they get sidetracked by other tasks that need to be completed and they don't prioritize what they actually want to be spending their time on. Others may find their phone could be a really big distraction. And so for some, they like to put it in a different room and leave it there, or they like to lock themselves out of certain apps, or, they like to turn it on do not disturb mode so they're not getting notifications that aren't urgent or important for them to be getting. But one of the keys of time management is to remember to be flexible, right? So, as much as we want to manage and plan our time, things are going to come up. We heard about it in the athlete panel. There are unexpected things that come up within our day that we have to deal with. And so, we do want to make sure that our plan has some flexibility built into it and be compassionate towards ourselves when something doesn't go right, or maybe we don't finish our entire to do list in a day, understanding that, some days we're really productive and other days may be more challenging to get that same level of productivity. So, having that self compassion. So, let's first focus on knowing our commitments as well as being able to prioritize those commitments. And to do this, one of the tools I'd like to introduce you to is the wheel of life. Oftentimes, people also refer to it as the balance wheel. I've also heard it called the wellness wheel. So it can be called a number of different things. Now, you'll find a blank copy of this in the athlete workbook, and I'll make sure that that link is available to you as well. So the wheel of life is divided into 8 pieces. Sometimes it's also referred to as a pie, just to throw another name in there, but it's divided into 8 pieces. And each section represents an area of importance in the person's life. So these are like their top 8 things that they focus their time on. This is a really individualized activity, so it's really up to the user of this tool to determine what those 8 sections represent. So, what are the areas for you? One of the things we can do to help us identify these are to consider our values, which we'll be introduced to later in the year. But considering your values, that can sometimes guide this. So, for example, for high performance athletes, typically the top 2 values center around sport as well as family and friends and school. So, I guess technically 3. But you can consider your values and how they can guide you in identifying what those areas are. Now, once we have our areas identified, we kind of place them around each section of the circle, and you'll see an example of this on the next slide. And the next step is to rate our current involvement in each of the areas from 1 to 10. For high performance athletes, they like to try and be a 10 on everything all the time. But in some cases, that's really just not possible to be firing at a 10 on everything all the time, right? That's where we have concerns around things like burnout, stress management, that kind of thing. So, what we really want to do is consider what's reasonable or what's realistic for us in that space. So for a high performance athlete who's also a student, so you're in really operating in two quite high performance domains. Maybe what happens is during the competitive season or during a really intense training block, we might see that realistically, our time for friends might be at a 2 or a 3. When we're in a rest block or the off season, we might see that we can maybe dedicate a 5 or a 6 to the time with our friends. So it will ebb and flow over the course of a season and what's happening for you, right? We may also see that during exam time at school, the school section goes to an 8 or a 9, and the sports section maybe goes to like a 4. So really, it's got to be realistic depending on the time that you have available to you and what your priorities are. Now, what 10 looks like for one person can also be different from what it looks like for another person. It's very personal and subjective. So this is very individualized, and how you define what a 10 may be for you in one area, another person may have something different. So easy example may be time with friends, right? So for some of us, for that feeling of fulfillment to occur within our friend section, we might need to spend 6 hours a week with our friends. For another person, maybe that just looks like a 1 or 2 hour coffee catch up with a couple of friends, and that's a 10. So again, very subjective, very individual. What yours looks like will very likely look different to what a classmate or a teammates looks like. Again, a reminder, we can't be 10 on everything, even if we're a high performer. That's when we get concerned with things like burnout. So keeping a realistic picture, we don't have to be a 10 on everything all the time. So let's look at an example. This is what a completed one might look like. So we're going around the circle, we're identifying our areas of importance. You can see on this area, or sorry, on this wheel, that friends, family, school, sport, wellness, hobbies, work, and academic planning are the 8 things that were identified as areas of importance. Once those areas have been identified, we go around and we rate ourselves. So, out of a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being our lowest, or sorry, 0 being our lowest involvement, 10 being our highest, um, what would we rate ourselves in that area? And we then can connect those markers when we've completed that part of the activity. So you can see here that X marks current. I'm recognizing that on this slide, somehow the colors got mixed up. So X and red are current. So you can see on the current sphere, someone has said, in this example, their friends are, I think that's a 5. Family is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So sorry, friends are 6, family is 5. School is at a 6, sport is at an 8. And you can keep going around and identifying. Then we can connect those dots to get a bit of a visual representation on things. Now, the second time we go around this, what we do is we think about how we want to change things, right? If our time isn't working for us, how can we change it? So for the second part where we look at the change, it's marked by an O and a blue line. So here we've seen a decrease. So someone was spending a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a 6. They rated themselves a 6 with their friends. And maybe they realized, hold on a second, this is a really important time for my schooling and my sport. So I actually need to decrease this time a little bit and I'm going to bring it down. And we see a change of 3. So now they're rating themselves wanting to get to a 3. So maybe decreasing that time. Now, one where we may see an increase in time is academic planning. So, for example, this could mean like planning for university, doing the research that's required for that, whether it's, an NCAA school, a Canadian school, um, spending some dedicated time here. So maybe this example, it was realized that, okay, hold on a second, like we're coming up close to application time. I really need to get my information organized. So I need to actually start increasing the amount of time that I'm spending on this area. So this is a really great tool to showcase some self-awareness around, where are you spending your time? Is that reasonable? Do you need to increase or decrease the amount of time that you're offering to that area? So, we see that friends, this example, it was something that had to be decreased. With family, it was something the individual thought that they should increase. Maybe they felt they weren't fulfilled in that family space. School, we didn't see a change. This example felt that it was, relatively realistic to keep that time commitment. Perhaps sport got really busy. Maybe there's a tournament, competition, regatta, something like that coming up, and the training time needed to increase, or perhaps there was more travel. Maybe it was a more intense training block, so that is increasing. We didn't see a change in wellness, and how individuals define this term could look very different, right? So for some people, wellness may just mean exercise. For other people, it could mean, mental health, general health, meal prep and planning. It could mean a number of things. So we didn't see any change in here in this example. It's relatively reasonable. Hobbies, the time could be decreased. So again, being realistic and honest, perhaps in this example, the time being spent or dedicated to the hobbies was too much in terms of what needed to happen for school and for sport. And so that was decreased. Similarly, we see, perhaps this person has a part-time role. We see a decrease there. Maybe they needed to decrease their hours at their job for the next month in order to accommodate additional time needing to be spent with sport and academic planning. So, again, really great tool provided you're honest with yourself about where your time is currently going, but what's actually realistic given your circumstance. So while watching this video, take a pause here, hop over to your athlete workbook. You can use that workbook to access the Wheel of Life, and you can then start to fill out yours. So you're going to start by identifying your top 8 sections that you want represented in this wheel. It is okay if you don't have 8. Some individuals just find that there's not really 8 areas they're dividing their time between right now. It is okay. There's always room to fill in those 8 if things change for you. And then what you're going to do when you have those 8 identified points is you're going to rate your current level of involvement in those and connect those up. Following that, you're then going to get really honest with yourself and think about what's realistic in terms of the time you have available to commit to these areas, and identifying whether you're going to stay the same, whether you're going to increase or decrease your time in that space, and then connecting those dots so you can get a visual representation. Once you've done that, what you can then do is revisit this tool, once a week, once every couple weeks, sometimes even once a month, just to check in with yourself, look at where your time's going, and assess if you need to make any changes. So pause here and take your first attempt at the Wheel of Life. Great. So welcome back. I hope you found that activity to be really useful and that you were able to, get honest with yourself and identify where you wanted to be spending your time and whether or not you need to make any changes. Now, the next tool I'm going to introduce you to is a tool that really hones in on prioritizing. So, for high performance athletes, one of the things that can be really tricky is trying to figure out when you have so many commitments and responsibilities, what do you prioritize and how do you actually do that? And so, there's a great tool. It's called the Eisenhower Matrix. And this tool allows prioritization of our tasks, giving us the control over the day, right? So sometimes we can feel like our to do list is kind of owning our day. and that we're not in control, that the list is in control of what has to be done. It can sometimes make us feel overwhelmed or disorganized or sometimes scattered and all over the place. This is a great tool to come back to if you're feeling that way, to just take a step back, take a bird's eye view on things, and think about, what do I want to prioritize and how can I be the person in the driver's seat of my day? It allows us to classify our tasks based on their level of importance and urgency. So, what it really does is it supports us in making informed decisions with regard to how we're allocating our time and our energy throughout the day. And this can lead to us seeing some increased productivity within our day, but also decreased stress because we're more clear on what we need to do and how important and urgent it is for us to get that done. So let's take a look at the the matrix here and what each of these terms means. So when we look at this, we'll see on the y-axis here we have urgent and non-urgent, and on the x we have important and not important. So what we're seeing is that urgent tasks are those tasks that demand our immediate focus. We need to really, really narrow in on them. This can be due to upcoming deadlines, unforeseen circumstances. So these are the ones that are potentially time sensitive, or maybe not if they're not urgent. And we need to think about or ask ourselves, does this require my immediate action? Is it something I have to do right now or relatively quickly? Then we look at importance. So we want to think about our long-term goals and our well-being when we're looking at our importance. So these things perhaps do not require our immediate attention. Maybe they're not super urgent, but they shouldn't be neglected because they are important to us, right? So we want to ask ourselves, does this task align with my goals and my values? And further to that, does it contribute to a larger project or objective, right? So if there's a big project you're working on, does this task help you, you know, narrow down on the things that have to be done to reach completion of that project or that objective? Moving on from there, we have our four quadrants of this matrix. So in the top left hand, we see the do matrix. Those are the things we need to do now. They require our immediate action, so they're relatively urgent. And they're somewhat important as well. So we think of things like deadlines, emergencies, critical meetings, right? Maybe your coach has called a team meeting for something and it's relatively urgent and important, right? Those are the things we do. These are the things that go to the top of the priority list, right? They're the things that we pretty much want to have done by day's end. Then we have the decide or the schedule option. These are the things that are not urgent, but they are important. So maybe they're of strategic importance, right? Maybe it's that thing that's like chip away at this project. So I'm being proactive with it. So it's important, but the project isn't due for a few weeks. So it hasn't become super urgent yet. What we want to do is schedule certain work blocks for us to start working through those important items. Okay, so that's the decide or the schedule. Then we move to the bottom left, which is our delegate quadrant. These are the things that are urgent, but they're not really super important. So they are time sensitive, but they don't require your specific time or expertise. These are the things that we want to delegate to others. Think of a group project, okay? So perhaps you're assigned a group project in school and there's 4 members of your group, and one person is supposed to be focusing in on that area. Now, as high performers, it's not uncommon for us to want to try and support other people as team players, but sometimes that can edge into a space of taking over someone else's work, thus feeling like it's our responsibility to get that work done. What may be more productive in terms of how you prioritize is to make sure that task or that area of the group project is being delegated to the person who's supposed to be developing the expertise on it and focusing in on that area. This will free up some time for you, be a bit less stressful because you won't have quite as much stress on your shoulders in terms of getting the project done. Yes, you're still contributing, you're still participating, but it's through your defined area of the project, and we're delegating other pieces to others who are supporting that project as well. Another one might be like in a really busy week. Maybe you need some support at home with getting some laundry done or some meal prep just to free up a little bit of time for you to perhaps direct more attention to studying for exams. That's where we can reach out to those important people in our lives and ask for support and just explain, hey, my priority right now is making sure I get this studying done so I can do well on this exam. One of the things that's really difficult for me to fit into my time right now is meal prepping or getting my laundry done. And I'm just wondering if you could support me on that, right? So asking others if they're willing to help us. So, delegate is maybe a strong word for that because we're not telling them to do it, but we're asking for that support to alleviate some time in our schedules. And the bottom right quadrant is the delete quadrant. So here we're looking at it's not super urgent and it's also not important, right? These are the things that we can take off our to-do list. It's going to clear any clutter, free some mental capacity. It's not going to become a stress, right? Really thinking, do I really need to do this? Is it urgent? Is it important? Probably not. I can take it off my priority list this week. Okay. So 4 quadrants, we have do, decide our schedule, delegate, and delete. Everything from very urgent and important all the way to not urgent or not important. So you can take the tasks that you have to complete and place them around this matrix based on the questions we've asked earlier. So it's your turn. In your athlete workbook around the time management topic, you'll see a blank Eisenhower matrix. The first part for you is to list your tasks, all of them. I think there's a defined number of spaces there, but you can certainly go over that. It's at the bottom of the page. Then you're going to consider each task and decide its level of urgency and importance, right? So, how urgent is it and how important is it? Once you've decided that, you're going to place it in the appropriate quadrant of your matrix. And then it'll show you kind of where you need to prioritize your time when you're done this. So we know that our time first needs to be focused on things in the do matrix, and then perhaps moving over to the decide. We can look to the delegate or the support area following that. And then those things that don't require our immediate attention and they're not super important, we can look to kind of take off our to-do list for the week to alleviate some capacity and some pressure. So pause the video here and take an attempt at your Eisenhower matrix to determine where your priorities lie and how you can complete them within the week. Welcome back. Hope you found that helpful and have a clearer idea on where your priorities are lying for your to-do list and your schedule, and hopefully being able to see that has helped you feel a little bit more organized in your approach to doing things. We did talk about throughout the Eisenhower matrix this ability to schedule things. And so we're not going to spend an abundance of time on it right now. You can certainly pause and work through this as you go. But there is a schedule that's been developed, so you can access it here. It shows a semester overview, so it is kind of more designed or developed for a university semester, but you can adjust it and tailor it based on each high school's approach to terms. And this will give you a really good overview of things like your class schedule, your to-do list, when you're in class, when you're out of class, when you're in training, when you're out of training. And when we schedule, we want to create like that bird's eye view, like we talked about a bit in the athlete panel, of having like this 3 to 4 month view on what your schedule looks like. And those are where we put those really big things, right? Like exam week, training camps out of town, competitions out of town, so on and so forth. So taking the time to create that 3 to 4 month like bird's eye view of what does the schedule look like. Then we get a little more detailed and we take that 1 month view. So we start to fill in those details a little bit more, right? Like what are the specific exams we're worrying about? What are the specific competitions we're worrying about? When do we travel? When's the plane take off? When does the plane land? From there, we look at the weekly. So this becomes like the really minute, well, not quite minute details, but much more detailed. So, you know, calculus 12 exam on this date at this time. Maybe it's, you're filling in your specific training times for the week. So we're not just looking at the tasks, we're also looking at scheduling the timing of those things to occur. And then we have our daily, which is like this is what my day looks like. So I'm waking up at 6 a.m. I'm eating breakfast at 6:15. I'm out the door by 7. I'm on the water by 7:45. I'm at school by 9:30. Those kinds of things. So we're really looking at the specific minute details, the timing. When we're planning our studying, we're thinking about what are we studying. We're not just putting study into our calendar. We're thinking about what are the priorities I need to study for. Maybe there's a math exam coming up and that's going to require 1 hour of time to practice. Maybe there's a certain set amount of chapters that you have to read for an English class. So our study doesn't just say study, it says, study math concepts, chapter 11 to 14 for 1 hour, and then it's read chapters 17 to 20 for English class, and then it's maybe an hour to complete a portion of an English essay that's due in a couple of weeks, right? So, really focusing in on specific tasks that you're spending your time on. Which then leads us to the ability to create our to-do list, right? If we have an idea of what our daily schedule looks like, we can then build a to-do list based on what's most important and what's most urgent, as well as how the day is unfolding. So when we look at a to-do list, we're looking at doing descending order or columns, right? So some people have one list, it's a longer list, but it goes in descending order from most important to least important and most urgent to least urgent in the day. We then some other folks like to use kind of like columns. So you could have a to-do list where you look at like these are the non-negotiables for the day. So these are the things that have to be completed by the time the day closes for me. And then another column that like these are the things I would like to do, but it's not the end of the world that I don't have if I don't have time to get them fully complete today and maybe like to get a start. And then we might have a third column that like these are the nice things that I would like to do, but if there's no time for them or they don't happen, that's okay. One of the other things you can do on your to-do list is add in an allotted time for each item. And so some people find that like they can get really carried away on a task. And one of the ways for them to be in control of their time is to add in like, maybe it's complete assignment. Yes, of course, you need to take the full amount of time you need in order to complete that if it's due. But perhaps, if you're working towards completing an English essay and you've got some time before it's due, maybe you set like I'm going to do 1 hour of dedicated work to them today. So you can add in a lot of time and then just set a timer on your phone or your clock or something to alert you when that time is up. I also find this is actually a really helpful thing to do when you're tidying around the house. That is a super easy thing to get in the trenches with. So perhaps you're tidying your room or you're helping tidy around the house. And it can be really easy to like organize one thing and it just cascades into a whole bunch of other things. So if you have a set amount of time to be able to do that, set a timer, and when it goes off, and that's what's done for the day, and you come back to it another day. So that can be helpful with that work around the house as well. But a key reminder as well, when we're planning our time, when we're considering our priorities, we need to remain flexible and have some self-compassion. So self-compassion is treating ourselves with kindness and understanding, particularly in the face of difficulties. Now, managing your time as a high performance student athlete is not always easy. It can be really challenging some days. So we want to remain kind to ourselves and be understanding with how much is on our plate in a given day. So self-compassion really is this opposite of harsh self-criticism and self-judgment. So we don't, say unkind things to ourselves if we don't get through our to-do list in a day. We don't give ourselves too harsh of criticism if we didn't get quite as far as we wanted to in meal prep or meal planning. Some folks for their recovery and just to take like a mental break for a little bit. They like to watch like 20 minutes of Netflix, but that can then result in them feeling unproductive and being really critical about dedicating 20 minutes to just taking a break. But it's like we talked about in that athlete panel, those breaks are important. And we just set a timer on them if we have a lot to do that day, right? So, not criticizing ourselves too much and not being super judgmental with ourselves. If something doesn't go as we had it planned on our to do list or our wheel or our matrix. One of the great ways to practice self-compassion towards yourself is to think about, a good friend who might be going through a challenging time, and offer ourselves the same support and encouragement we would give to that friend, right? So around managing our time, we're finding that it's going to be really overwhelming or we didn't get done what we wanted to do, and we find ourselves in that place of judgment and criticism. Perhaps we think about what would I say to a friend if they were in the same situation that I was right now, and um, how can I do that same favor to myself? So make sure in all of this time management, it is a process to learn it. It takes time to plan time to save time, right? Planning our time takes time, but it's worth it to sit down for an hour or two every week to plan that time to have a more organized approach to the week. And we then can have a more productive approach to the week. So while it may take us time to do this, it actually saves us time in the long run and it allows us to work smarter, not harder, as we talked about at the beginning of our athlete panel. So I hope you found those tools useful. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. These are things you can continuously come back to and build into your strategies for time management, especially those weeks that you're feeling like there's a lot to do and there's maybe not quite as much time as you would like to be able to do them in. So utilize them as you wish. I hope you find them helpful, but I also understand, that not everyone finds every tool to be super useful or helpful to them, and that's okay too. It's all about finding what works for you and what's going to help you be the most productive you can be. So thank you so much for your time and all the best as you continue to plan out your time and manage your schedules and your priorities.